A toast to the end of World of Warcraft as we know it.
Yep. Yeah, as a disclaimer, this is mostly... Okay, the post isn't satire, but our approach to this is either largely satirical or arguing for devil's advocate, not actually completely serious.
Yes. So basically what happened is Matt found a Reddit post.
Yeah, which has some merit to be discussed.
Yep. So in a way you could say it's a... You can maybe say, oh, this is just a big long re, but there are actually some real points, and it's just about how cross-faction changes aspects of the texture of World of Warcraft, and it very much solidifies that it's kind of not going to go back to the way it was. But then also, I think there are some counter-arguments here, where you can still have there be war between the factions and have the cross-faction system exist, because they do actually have the narrative lampshading for that.
Yeah. Which also brings into the conversation, why does cross-faction feel like it's necessary? Why does it feel like it makes sense to us? Why would people not like it? And also, what's the deal with cross-faction or faction storytelling in World of Warcraft? Why is it the way it is? What did it used to be like? Was it any better? Different?
Yeah. So the core contention basically is that WoW's doing really badly. They're having issues with just people being able to play with people. So they're trying to merge their player bases so that the game is just more playable. And the whole focus of this is on the high-end players. In usual Blizzard elitist jerks fashion. It looks bad if the Alliance can't compete in their esport events to the same level as the Horde. Saying, would they do this if the game had Wrath of the Lich King-like sub-numbers? Maybe something to think about.
Probably not.
Yeah, they certainly wouldn't feel as much need.
Yep. Absolutely.
But I guess in this, where do you think the point is?
Yeah, so it's that thing of, this is clearly like someone's kind of, I get a little bit of an agenda of just, this, from the perspective, this is clearly not being done because they think cross-factions are a really good idea and really cool for the health of the game and stuff. This person's basically saying it's clearly just, they're having playability issues because the population's down. I don't know if that's true, because it's still going to be the case of, it doesn't matter if you had 100 million players, you would still have the problem of Horde faction imbalance, meaning 80% plus players are on Horde, so it's the same kind of problem generally speaking. But it's just that case of I guess what they say here, which is you remove basic key features when your game's performing badly, but the game was built around cross-faction or not having cross-faction of the faction war from the beginning. And then it looks a little bit more like other MMOs, like it's using its unique context, its unique flavor. Because being able to party with other faction members in World of Warcraft kills what World of Warcraft was initially all about, in a sense. Not really, but kind of all a sense of you're one faction. This is you're a member of the Horde. You're a member of the Alliance. That's it. Which was largely the case in vanilla and for a long time.
Well, it's like fantasy-wise, you still are, but the mechanics are not as harsh.
Yeah. And
then changes how it feels.
And does that feeling then mean for the future the fantasy will be less there? Not literally necessarily, but arguably if they're willing to say, cross-faction's a good idea, then maybe they are happy to say, then we'll not focus on the factions so much in future. Which is what this person's generally afraid of. If they're all saying, Blizzard could solve this problem in different ways. They could merge servers, they could add player surnames, they could make WoW free to play, which that would certainly solve a population problem, arguably. But there's other downsides and just stuff like that. But no, they go, okay. So the groups that hate each other, according to this player's perspective of the game and some player's perspective of the game, are just best of friends now. How could a Night Elf be in a group of the Forsaken? That doesn't make any sense in terms of how they're considering the game, which is sort of fair enough, but yeah.
I suppose it depends. Do you sort of see history as the sum of individual stories, or do you see history as monolithic, homogeneous blocks?
Yeah.
And that's, I think, something that kind of trips people up in a way.
Yeah.
You can see plenty of examples of, people who can cooperate even though they come from two completely opposed geopolitical blocks. Not to be all too IRL about it. Yeah. I think then what matters is Blizzard's handling of these things within the game.
Yeah.
And I think that's why they've really tried to make this be, if you don't like cross-faction, you really don't have to see it.
Yeah.
They've tried to make it as opt-in as they can. It's definitely better than it being opt-out.
For sure, yeah.
But I certainly think the question is then, what are these factions like going forward? Do we actually know what their stories are? Because really, that's the thing in Warcraft, like, you know, the Alliance and the Horde, and even in Warcraft 3, like there's been cooperation for a long time.
Yeah.
Like, cross-faction happened in Warcraft 3.
Yeah.
But it's just, can the in-game representation of the factions still make sense?
Yeah.
Because you can, you know, like, Soviets were in the Allies. And then not that much time, Soviets very much against who were the Allies, right?
Yeah.
Like, all these things shift and change over time depending on what actually happens. And if this is going to feel like a real fantasy universe, then those things should actually feel right, feel real. Yeah. So I think Blizzard loses here if they do this, but then they don't resolve the faction war with the scope and the detail that it really deserves. Because it's a faction war that in many ways happened off screen. Like, the faction war as it pertains to the bits of the factions that we care about, you know, that was in the mission table. So I think, like, because they've messed up that faction war, other than having it being reflected in gameplay mechanics into Zara lore, which is pretty damn cool, I think that just, like, threw the factions off a bit.
Yeah.
Threw the players off a bit.
Yeah, so this post goes into it a little bit where it talks about, you know, when they started playing SWTOR, their fantasy was the Sith, the bad guys in the movie. The conflict of the Sith and Jedi is what invested them in the game. And in the same way, their memories of World of Warcraft are, and I kind of feel this because I've been doing Ashenvale and TBC recently, but going around Ashenvale as a night elf and fighting off orcs. You know, here are the orcs, here's this enemy faction. They literally have an outpost in this area. I'm killing their NPCs, but I'm actually close to where a player could come in and fuck with me. So it actually felt like, oh, this is an invading faction. I'm pushing them out. I'm getting rid of their foothold in the Warsong lumber camp.
Yeah.
And that's actually kind of meaningful. It wasn't super meaningful,
but it feels
like,
good.
But it felt meaningful to me. It's like, okay, yeah, I've sorted out this problem of the orcs encroaching on our territory. It even happened when there was a player was, I think it was a hunter. I think, yeah, it was a hunter, but a level below me, was in the Silver Ring outpost with a couple of the Splinter Tree attackers. So these were Horde NPCs fighting Alliance NPCs. He was helping the Horde NPCs push in, and I don't even know if that was part of a quest or if it was just something happening. But then I saw that, but I'm a druid, so I stealthed up, killed him, went and healed up, and then helped the Night Elf NPCs push back the Horde thing, and that felt like a really cool thing. So I kind of see where that's the thing coming from. And that's the thing where they kind of, when they started to create this single faction story for the 2-faction game overall, it kind of lost that perspective. I kind of lost that. Okay, it definitely feels different when I'm spending so much time watching, you know, the Jaina and Thrall arm touch. It's like, oh, orcs aren't so bad. But my experience of the game is I've been killing a load of orcs. Shit, should I feel bad about that or something? But that's a kind of the ludonarrative dissonance, in a way, where it comes with that dissonance. And I think, like, them botching the faction storylines is kind of a decent part of this. Like the post points out, Cairn kills off screen. Sure. Great. There's the faction leader just dead and nothing happens.
Yeah.
Nothing happens with it whatsoever. Obviously, that's addressed in the Mulgore storyline, but for a Tauren who's just started playing the game, anyone else doesn't really know or get to deal with that in any real meaningful capacity. Stuff like that. It's just kind of hateful, honestly, but they've failed on getting that faction storyline to feel meaningful throughout the years. And I think that's where the crux of the kind of issue is like they've, in a world where if the faction storylines and the faction stuff was done better and people felt more about their factions, would we have a world where cross-faction is like, oh yeah, this is the obvious answer?
I think
that's the thing.
I think so. Because if the faction war felt real, if all of that felt real and war mode also existed, but you also had cross-faction, like, it is possible to explain those things. It can be.
Explain them,
You know, are you a Horde soldier? Somebody actually had a good post there in chat. My character is not a Horde soldier. My character is an adventurer from the Horde.
Yeah.
And an adventurer from the Horde is able to side with the Horde, turn on war mode, and never play with Alliance characters. an adventurer from the Horde is able to say no to war mode and partner up with a character in the Alliance.
Yeah.
That happened in Warcraft 3.
Yeah, and that's the thing where none of that's really happened or like felt meaningful in the game or been supported, where it's kind of like it's always either the faction war is either happening or it's not.
Yeah.
It's not this like thing where you kind of personally make kind of some what are, fake moral choices as you go through the game, where they don't kind of go for any of that storytelling. They don't make it fit part of the game, because that's the thing where I guess the point is a lot of this cross-faction stuff is like, oh, well, cross-faction makes sense narratively now because it's not been about faction war. You could definitely make it work in a game about the faction war, and that would be different and interesting. But it's kind of the thing of, if World of Warcraft was about a two-faction storyline and always kind of stayed that way, like it was billed as, like it was intended to be, like they've tried and largely, or not largely, but kind of mostly failed at, then would the conversation be very different? Is this kind of putting in an alternate timeline World of Warcraft that could maybe come back at any moment where it's about the faction differences? Is this kind of being pushed into the corner of this will never happen now because the cross faction's taking up so much of the, well, we can't super make these factions hate each other too much because cross faction gameplay, maybe.
It's
maybe.
How do they do that? And basically here's the thing. This can all be lampshaded.
Yeah.
This can all be fucking lampshaded. So they could have a big faction war again, but there could always be a character in your faction that is not a Hawk.
Yeah.
And they already have characters who would work for that. And through just a little bit of player choice in a quest line that doesn't even have to change game mechanics, you could express your character in what path of the quests that you choose.
Yeah.
And whatever way you do that, that could make your own gameplay mechanic choices. So war mode, no war mode, cross-faction, no cross-faction. It could just make that make sense.
Yeah.
It's just all on can Blizzard actually reflect the state of this world and its factions well in the game. And unfortunately, in BFA, their best opportunity to do that, they really didn't do a good job.
Yeah.
Because they made it all Kulturas and Zandalar, which you can understand because they're parts of a new expansion's feature set. But when people think about the factions, they think of Stormwind and Orgrimmar. And there was nowhere near enough traditional faction shit in BFA.
Yeah.
So I think on the back of, as you said, in the back of that disappointment, that's why this feels weird to players. If they had just executed this stuff well, then I don't think this discussion would even have happened much.
Yeah. It's just it's like, I think I was definitely taking the piss a little bit when I said a toast to the end of World of Warcraft. But it's almost like a toast to the end of the World of Warcraft that could have been.
Yeah.
As opposed to the World of Warcraft as it is.
Well,
because it's continuing on perfectly fine.
Yeah, as we look Into Dragonflight, I think the faction framing of Dragonflight is kind of, it's really less Alliance and Horde going there. And it's far more the Explorers League and the Apothecary both going there, or the Reliquary, whatever. Basically, the Explorers League and the Horde Explorers League. Like, they both go there. And heroes from both factions are invited over by Alex Strasser.
Yeah.
So in a world like that, it makes sense that there's cooperation. It could also make sense that players in those factions with grudges will turn war mode on and fight.
Yeah.
It all, there's not massive ludonarrative dissonance there.
Yeah.
I suppose just how they carry this forward beyond that, which certainly they'll have to. We're going to have an Alliance drama expansion. We've had so many Horde drama expansions. I mean, BFA is a Horde drama expansion. In a way, Shadowlands is rooted in that very same Horde drama. Garrosh was Horde drama. Even some of Cataclysm, because that was quite Garrosh driven, was even Horde drama. Yeah. Because Garrosh is just, he's angry now. Cool. He took some steroids, got aggressive, and now it's war. It's been so much chaos for the Horde, and they've had a revolving door of leaders where, we just lost Varian for a bit, and Mekatork turned into an ice cube.
Yeah. And that didn't matter.
Yeah, which didn't matter.
Oh, that actually, no. Okay, never mind. Yeah. That annoys me, literally, because I was doing Westfall stuff recently, so that really annoys me.
Yeah. But I think what all that means, though, is after this, we've been talking about Yrel and Gan and Terralion and Matthias Shaw. There's actually the bones of a really cool Alliance story there, especially in the backdrop of Anduin having a bunch of trauma and, being a bit less sure of himself. like that could make for brilliant story that would be faction story that would finally be alliance drama driving it rather than Horde. And that could be great.
But that's the thing. Well, I mean, this is where I come to it after playing a bit of Classic. That's not a faction story. That's an alliance story. That's not a story that kind of an individual would have interest in based on the faction elements and like the kind of faction politics element.
Okay,
that'll
fair.
be the alliance's characters, which is just a different set of characters, which doesn't really matter to players versus something like Ashenvale, something like the West, like the how alliance focused it was to be in, you know, Darkshire, Darkwood, Duskwood, fuck, Jesus Christ, Duskwood, God.
If
Stuff like that.
there's a big if there.
Yeah.
I think it's just because any of these stories of like a big political bloc are going to involve characters because those are the people who make the decisions that lead to the faction doing what the faction does. Blizzard have just struggled. Like they've had good examples, like all the Corcoran guys appearing in the, the Barons patch 5.3. Like I know it wasn't the most in-depth patch, but it was like, oh shit, yeah, this is actually happening. It kind of felt like things were going on in the factions. They just need to do way more of that.
Yeah,
so
counterpoint, that was 9 years ago.
That was 9 years ago. Yeah, so it needs to not feel like the faction war is happening in the background and we're only seeing the small character-driven story. It's an MMO. It has to have the grand scope.
Yeah, for sure. I think the thing that they've the thing that they've missed out on is having people feel attached to their faction for reasons that matter to the player, as opposed to matter to the storytelling. Because it would be so interesting to actually have those little bits of like, hey, here's the Horde encroaching on Alliance territory. Knock them back. Maybe it's bad actors. Maybe it's the Horde as a block of units trying to make their way in. But even just a little bit of something like that is like, that's clearly so much not their focus anymore. And then with cross-faction being codified into the game is like, oh yeah, here's the thing. It's like, it's such a minor thing and you could always lampshade it no matter how you wanted it. You could just make you could make cross-faction make sense in any universe. You could just write around it or whatever. But it's like, as a focus of World of Warcraft, it's kind of, it's the death knell for that kind of vanilla feel, I think.
Yeah. It really makes me want a good Classic Plus.
For sure, 100%, yeah.
I think that if they do a Classic Plus that feels more sandboxy, that leans into faction tension more, we could, like, I don't know. I guess Project Ascension official.
Basically, yeah.
Which I think it actually, though, people were saying Ascension has cross-faction. I didn't know that.
Ascension's got everything. Everything, like, it's nuts.
It's a pity. I'm fairly sure it still is the case that if you do private server shit, like, it kind of does close doors with Blizzard, which I understand why.
It's
completely understandable.
It is literally a competing service that is using their data, their IP, their everything. It is no, like, legal or even, like, ethical grounds to stand on, honestly.
Other than it slaps.
Yeah. That's
in some of these cases. Like, at least Nostarius led to Classic existing. But it's like, even from a design perspective, I suppose what I could do is I could look at all the things Ascension does and not play it, not have any footage of it, and then just talk about, oh, this is an interesting little design experiment within Warcraft. Because I haven't looked into Ascension whatsoever, but everything people share, the shit people share with me is just incredible.
I have not played it, but I have followed it. It is a very, very interesting situation. I get emails because I signed up once and I get emails. I'm like, you're doing what? What do you mean you're doing this in your game? It's crazy.
Yeah, hobbyist development is often just cool. Yeah, it's like, even if it gets shut down or whatever, like, it's just cool. That said, Blizzard could have shut that down a long time ago if they really wanted to.
I think they know, especially after Nostalrius, that there's nothing to gain. They probably won't get a lot of players back if they went and shot Ascension down. It cost their legal team a bit of money. It probably wouldn't gain them that much money, and it would lose them a lot of goodwill.
I suppose at least a person on Ascension is a person seeing Warcraft.
Yeah.
And they may be, maybe they're going to be a bit more likely to hop into Wrath Classic. Yeah. Or, not that pigs fly or anything, even come back to Modern.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing as like Nintendo. Nintendo are notorious for shooting everything down. Everything that might be vaguely cool. Because they're like, no one touches our IP but us. And you're like, you're killing exceptional products or projects. You're killing wonderful projects that your fans have spent years making because you won't, and they're not even like heavily monetizing them or anything. It's just, what was it? Was it it was like the Metroid 2 remake or something. Basically, there's a lot of stuff that they kill, and everyone hates them for it.
Yeah.
And that just means people don't get to experience any of that cool stuff. And it's like Blizzard probably don't want that experience of, oh yeah, you're literally just hated by people.
Yeah, so look, there you go. Now, from my perspective, I think it's pragmatically good for the game right now. But what I really want to see is whenever this alliance-led storyline that we think is coming and that has been set up in the lore, when that comes, what I want to see is them not use cross-faction as an excuse to pull punches and to shortchange the actual factional implications of a character-driven story.
Yeah, I think that's...
So we'll see.
Yep, that's where I think that's where this person's post's fear comes from. It's like, this is another nail in the coffin for the game I wanted this to be. And I don't entirely agree. Absolutely not. Also, they're basically doom posting about the game. But at the same point, I see where they're coming from and I can feel it.
Yeah, it's a feeling that's out there.
Yeah.
We could ignore it or we could engage with it.
For sure, yeah.